Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about some thoughts and theories I have about the next upcoming Spider-Man movie, because at the time of me recording this, well, yesterday at the time of me recording this, the official title for the next Spider-Man movie was revealed, and that is Spider-Man No Way Home. So I just want to share some thoughts about potentially what that title can necessarily, convey about what could go down in the movie. Obviously, yesterday I was also watching SEN Live as they talked about this, obviously sharing their thoughts about it, while also joking about like what the title could actually be and stuff like that. But I'm going to kind of build off of some of the points that they brought up, as well as kind of sharing my own thoughts about it. A thing kind of going into this that has to be kept in mind that I was kind of letting slip my mind too. It's like, well, we also have to consider like what goes down in WandaVision is obviously going to have an impact on potentially No Way Home, because obviously Doctor Strange is going to be tied into both that, because WandaVision is tied into Doctor Strange because Wanda herself is going to be a part of Doctor Strange too, into the multiverse of madness. And also with what we've heard most recently with all these different rumors about No Way Home, it also seems that we're going to be dealing with multiverse stuff in that regard too. So because where they've set WandaVision up is that it's taking place like a couple weeks after Endgame. Someone had said that like Far From Home takes place a couple months later, but I didn't remember them specifying that. They probably did, but I haven't seen the movie since it originally was in theaters in 2019. I haven't subsequently rewatched it yet, so maybe they did explain that in the movie, or how long it had been. I just don't remember. But it makes you wonder, how long is it going to be in between Far From Home and No Way Home? Like how long is the time frame? And also other stuff like, depends on how, because we're going to be flipping a little bit here and there throughout the timeline in certain regards. So it does beg the question, like, what other events are also going to be taking place in between Far From Home and No Way Home, depending, like I said, on that time frame and stuff. But since I brought it up, is the whole multiverse angle to it. That could be where we get the whole No Way Home, that maybe the multiverse stuff won't be, because that also comes down to it, like, is it going to be a big part of the story? Is it going to be a small part of the story? Could, like, while he's on the run, Peter end up getting lost in the multiverse? That could be his story, because obviously there's the rumors of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire returning as Spider-Man, whether it's as a bigger role, whether it's just small cameos. Obviously the whole Jamie Foxx as Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, like stuff like that. I think there even like was that thing about like Alfred Molina returning as Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2, so maybe there's something to that. Once again, we don't know like 100% of I don't remember what was 100% confirmed and what was still a rumor. So whether or not there's the full-blown like multiverse angle to it could also imply that, because it could be a situation of the multiverse is there to a small extent, but that could be the stinger of the movie, that when it's all said and done, he could get lost in the multiverse. Because that also thing has to be considered is like, well, there's a whole conversation about the Marvel Cinematic Universe in Spider-Man. Spider-Man's only supposed to have this final movie, No Way Home, and one more appearance before he fully reverts back to being just in the Sonyverse with Venom, Morbius, and all of that. Now, whether that ends up being the case, because I think at least that's where I was the last time I heard the deal was at. I don't know if things have subsequently changed since then, so that could be their way to pull Spidey out of this universe and put him into the Sonyverse. So like, yeah, he leaves like the multiverse, leaves the MCU behind, and ends up in the Sony, purely in the Sony movies. I don't know if that's how they're going to handle that or not. It could be an interesting way. So that could be the thing of No Way Home, like the home he knew, the people he knew are no longer the people he knew. He meets like multiverse doppelgangers of the people he knew, and live a completely different life. That could be an angle to it. Like I said, it depends on how big or how small they want to add the multiverse angle to that. Like, because it could just be like a little here and there. It could just be a stinger at the end of the movie, or it could be a huge plot point. Another angle, and this was discussed during SEN Live, is like him being on the run. That could be the No Way Home of like, hey, like he's on the run and like everyone knows who he is. The exact wording they use on SEN Live is like the genie's out of the bottle. So it could be a situation of his identity's out there. So like that might be a genie he can never put back in the bottle. Because and that's something I've talked about before. Where like in the grand scheme of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, whereas in the comic books, secret identities are a big thing. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they're not that big of a thing. Like Captain America has been out and about without his helmet on. People know that Tony is Iron Man. So like, I mean, it's kind of, once again, it's kind of vague in other characters' cases whether people really know their identity. I'm sure Clint and Natasha could kind of hide their identity. I mean, they've, you know, especially Natasha, she's done the whole spy thing. So like her background's hidden anyway, but Clint, he's probably able to kind of hide his real identity. I mean, he kept his family away from all that anyway, so it probably not a struggle on that front, but it's like, secret identities don't seem like it's really a thing. The only examples are Daredevil and Spider-Man. They're the only ones that have really ever really had the whole, you know, secret identity thing, because everyone else, it's not really a secret identity thing. It's more just a code name, like you know, Steve being Captain America to a certain extent. Like I said, he's just out and about, just Steve Rogers most of the time, even though he's still Captain America, you know? So I'm curious like how they would potentially, you know, that could be an interesting aspect too. Like, I mean, because I think that's come up in the comic books before where his identity's become publicly known. I mean, like, there's a handful of people that actually know who he was, like, obviously beforehand, but even more so now because of Mysterio. So I'm curious to see how that whole situation ends up ultimately shaking out. Obviously, there's also talks about, you know, potentially Matt Murdock popping up, you know, and being his lawyer representing him in court and everything. So that also begs the question, like, well, once again, like, which Matt Murdock are we getting? Are we getting kind of, some people suggested, like, because of the J. Jonah Jameson we got in this world, maybe we're getting a different, like, Charlie Cox is playing Daredevil, but he's playing this universes of it, that's technically another universes, even though the Netflix stuff is part of the MCU, is tangentially connected, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of was and is, so it might get treated like that. They'll kind of like soft rebooted into this universe, maybe. Not to say that depends on how that all plays out, because there's also the other angle of like, well, She-Hulk has been established and cast. Now whether that necessarily will be something they handle necessarily, like before she actually gets her own show and everything, maybe she'll make a small appearance and No Way Home and be his lawyer. You know, it depends on how they can ultimately end up playing that all out. This is pulling from the Ultimate comic books a little bit. I don't see them doing this, but let's not forget, well, because it also depends on the universe, but Peter does, spoilers, die in Ultimate Comics, and that's what leads to Miles. Well, it's not really that much of a spoiler, because that's what happened. Well, it happened in Spider-Verse, the movie, so, you know, that universe's Peter Parker died, so they could be setting this up, because Peter in the comics is still in high school when he died. He's like 15 or something when he dies, which is actually super dark when you think about it. That could be what they're potentially setting up, especially if they're setting up like a Sinister Six type of situation with the Sony stuff. This could kind of lead into this, and it could be very much like the scene from Spider-Man 2018 for PS4, that Spider-Man where basically all his villains are together kicking his ass. We could definitely get a moment like that, and that's kind of what happens to Peter in the comic books when he dies in the Ultimate Comics. So maybe they could be bringing that into it, because someone yesterday on SEN was suggesting, like, when you look at, I forgot, there was something circled in a shape that someone was like, oh, it looks like it could be shaped like Puerto Rico. Could this be like a slight wink and nod to Miles Morales? Because they could be setting that up, especially if you're doing a Spider-Verse thing. So I don't know, that'd be interesting. It'd be super sad to think like, oh, that's where this is all going and potentially could end. I mean, that could be the thing of like, Peter's in the corner and there's no way home because this is the end for him. But I don't know, I feel like that'd be a little too dark for the MCU. I mean, there's been deaths, obviously, but it's just like, I feel like that'd be too dark to do that to a young character like that. Yes, Tom Holland's in his 20s, but the character itself is supposed to be like 15 or 16, so that's why I'm like, like I said, for comic books, that's already dark in its own right, but I just think, I don't know, like, comic books have done dark stuff in the past anyway, so it's, you know, it's no surprise on that front, but I don't know if that's something that MCU would necessarily do, especially because they said, like, oh, he has, like, one final appearance, but you never know what that could necessarily entail, so I don't think they'll go necessarily that dark with it, but that could still be, you know, a potential setup for, like, Miles or something in this universe. Like I said, it might even be, like, because Peter no longer exists in his universe, because he got sucked into a different dimension because of the multiverse, it could be the thing of now Miles has to pop up because there is no more Spider-Man. People, maybe it's kind of a thing of, a little spoilers, maybe it's a little Walking Dead where everyone thinks Rick is dead when in actuality he's not. So maybe that's the thing of everyone thinks, oh, Peter Parker's Spider-Man, but everyone thinks he died, but secretly he got sent to a different multiverse. So even the Avengers think he's dead when in actuality he just popped into another universe and probably has to deal with that. Maybe not. And that could be what inspires, like, the next Spider-Man being Miles Morales. That could be a whole angle to it as well. Like I said, just purely throwing out some speculatory stuff at this point. It's all just something to be considered, considering that such a title like No Way Home is so permanent. It just feels like this is a sign of there's no going back. So whatever, like I said, whether it's his situation is his identity or anything else I brought up, whatever it goes down in this movie will have permanent ramifications, not only for the character and the people around him, but most likely for the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole too. So like it's going to be interesting to see kind of on what front. Because I'm wondering, you know, with someone like Doctor Strange, will we get the more mystical side, since we are kind of spoilers, to a slight extent spoilers, working down that angle more and more with WandaVision. I mean, because I'm saying all this, but obviously like WandaVision, the newest episode comes out, well, tomorrow at the time we're recording this, but today when this video goes out. So you know, because we don't even know how WandaVision is going to end, because it might time skip a little bit in its final episode at some point in time, or maybe not. You know, it's set up a lot of stuff too with other characters, and how those other characters, we don't even know their situations in the Marvel Cinematic Universe might impact Peter's situation and Spider-Man or not. Like, just like I said, just a lot of questions, a lot of speculation at this point in time. But you know, I talked about it yesterday, but this is the Marvel property I'm the most excited for. I've been looking forward to this movie since I saw Far From Home and what they were setting up at the end. That was the biggest, like, what? Where are we going with this? So I'm really pumped, you know, to see what this movie has in store for us. Obviously, once again, these are just some of my thoughts. Like I said, this is some stuff I picked up from other people as well that I kind of elaborate and kind of put my own thoughts and takes on. But I'd love to get to know your thoughts about it. What are some things that you've heard that you would like to see or think we might see in the movie? What are just some of your own thoughts about what we can see or expect in a movie, or rather what you want in a movie? Just let me know your thoughts in general about everything that I've brought up in this video. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, light to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good